Florida did what? They beat Ole Miss. Yes, they did. Why wouldn't we? Why would we be surprised at that? They're a top 25 team. No, they're not, Josh. Well, you're right. The AP does not have Florida ranked in the top 25. But we have never quit Florida. JP polls had them in the top 25 for a while. This game was good. We gave it 4 Chali on the 1 to 5 Chalice rating scale. And if you listened to the show last week, took a fair amount of criticism because I started to make this point about Florida a few weeks ago. Florida with DJ Lagway is a top 25 caliber team, just full stop. And you either watch them and you get what I'm saying or you hear what I'm not saying. Because there are a lot of folks out there who just want to hate the SEC. So if you say anything remotely positive about an SEC member institution, it gets twisted and misconstrued. So, what I didn't say was Florida belongs in the top 25. What I didn't say is Florida should be mentioned anywhere near the playoff. I didn't say any of those things because those things aren't true. I don't feel that. I actually don't care about that at all as it relates to yesterday's game, Ole Miss going to Gainesville. What caliber of team are they going to face? What caliber of challenge are they going up against? And truthfully, it doesn't really matter what happened a few months ago against Miami as it relates to that. That Miami game in week 1 happened, and it's on your resume, and you should have to pay for it because you lost that game convincingly. But if DJ Lagway is your starting quarterback now, and he's healthy, and he's doing things that really no other quarterback in the country is doing, then I look at you and I say, you got 40-plus blue-chip players still on this team. They haven't quit on Billy Napier. You got an alien at quarterback, still got 90,000 in the swamp. I don't really think I'm playing my typical 5-5 team here. I don't really think that's the resistance level that I'm going to get. So we saw that a few weeks ago. We said it was going to be the case in this game, and it was. And so people either understand that or they just say, no, you are what your record says you are, and this was a horrible loss for Ole Miss. Well, it wasn't a horrible loss, but it's a loss, and it counts, and Ole Miss is out of this thing now. I'll tell you the loss that's bad for Ole Miss is the Kentucky loss. That's the loss that's really bad. I can stomach them going down there and taking an L in this environment against that team. It's the Kentucky loss that gave them no margin for error. The padlock stat here, very simple. Paper popping simple. Red zone. Florida was 2 of 2 down there for 14 points. Ole Miss 0 of 3 for 0 points. That's what decided this game. Florida ran it pretty well. 45 times, 164 yards. Lagway's just doing 1 or 2 things per game that put your jaw on the ground. His stat line's not out of this world. He was 10 of 17 in this game. It's never a performance that if you're box score surfing is going to stand out to you. But if you're scrolling through social media, if you're not watching the game, during a Florida game with that dude playing, you're going to be scrolling, and then boom, you're going to see it. He's just doing something at a random point in the third quarter that no other quarterback in the country is doing physically. And he did it again yesterday. And you can't do anything. You can't defend it. You just tip your cap and you say, how did that just happen? First, you got to watch the replay. And then after you watch the replay, you say, how do you defend that? And the answer is you don't. And so that's kind of what Ole Miss dealt with yesterday. But it was self-inflicted, too, for Ole Miss. And that's been the case in a lot of their losses. The way Ole Miss's season has gone is so confounding to me. Ole Miss was a team that had struggled to get over that big game hump. And then this year, they beat Georgia resoundingly, but it's the Kentuckys of the world. It's the Floridas of the world. As much respect as I have for the caliber of ball Florida's playing right now, that's still a game Ole Miss has got to go win. If you fancy yourself a playoff team, you got to go win that game. And they don't do it, and they play some of their worst football of the season in the biggest moment. This is November. This is when you're supposed to be scaling. In the Kentucky, LSU, and Florida games, Ole Miss has given up 14 sacks and 25 tackles for loss. That's what makes them so hard to predict. I had one of my own friends, one of our own, came at me because I had Ole Miss at number 2 or 3 last week in the JP poll, which is a power rating, not a ranking. And they said, man, I bet you regret having them up there. I don't. That model said what it said about them. But the thing about Ole Miss is The Georgia game was real, but the Kentucky game was real. And what I mean by that is both of those versions of that team are out there. It just turns out that as they got deeper into the season, the bad version of Ole Miss did not get filtered out. It was still there. And what you hope when you see these teams with really, really like high-end potential is they start hitting that different gear. That's what the good ones do, or the great ones do that, I should say. They hit a different gear in November. And it makes you say things like, and I remember earlier in the season, this team, remember that game against so-and-so? Now look at them, though. That's the way they're talking about Oregon, the Wisconsin game notwithstanding, which I think was dynamics related. I mean, Oregon struggled against Idaho in week 1. Does anyone even remember that now? No, because they've scaled up. They're playing their best ball at the right time. Ole Miss just didn't do that. They didn't figure out a way to do that. It's a shame. It's gut-wrenching because this team was not put together in a typical way. This was an all-in 2024 approach for Ole Miss. Everybody knows it, who's honest with themselves. They went all in, chips to the middle of the table. They're going to field a team next year. It's nothing like that. But this was the one. This needed to be the one, and it will not be the one. And the hardest part about it is you can go back to those 3 losses and you can say, I mean, the LSU game's tough. But this Florida game, the red zone, the turnovers, the Kentucky game, didn't even top 20 points at home. That's on us. Billy Napier is going to finish 7-5. If they beat Florida State, and I think they're going to go in dry on them, if they beat Florida State this Saturday, they're going to finish 7-5. And that, again, goes to show you Meemaw's golden rule about head coaches is still in effect today, just as it's always been. Don't judge them until the end of the year. I like a lot of you are watching live right now. And by the way, if you're watching live, please subscribe to the channel because we do the show all year round, and you subscribing helps us do that. But a lot of you are watching live right now. We got like 11,000 people watching live. Think about your opinion on Billy Napier. Or if you're listening to the replay, whatever, think about your opinion on Billy Napier. How much has it changed this year? After the Miami game, it's really, really bad. But then later in the year, they rebound a little bit. And then they go to overtime against Tennessee, and they almost beat them. And then they beat LSU, and now they've beaten Ole Miss, and it's like been up, down, up, down. It's like a seismograph. It's like you live in LA, and it's a seismograph. And is that really how I want to think about head coaches? They put a microphone in my face 3 days a week. Is that really how I want my opinion to change on head coaches? My answer is no. So by and large, you'll notice I don't do any hot seat talk on this show. With Napier earlier in the season, all I did really with Napier was regurgitate what we were getting from big voices down at Florida. He was done. Napier was done. I mean, that thing was sealed. And then a funny thing happened. He kept coming to work. And that staff kept coming to work. And most importantly, those players kept coming to work. I was talking to an NFL scout in week 3. And that NFL scout, longtime NFL scout, said he's going to lose that team. I mean, that team's going to go in the tank. And there was every reason to think that. They did not. When we were there in spring, I got criticized up and down because I just said, I think they're made of the right thing. They just haven't won enough. But I think the DNA of that program, the guts of that program, it's what it needs to be. Now they just got to go win. And then again this year, they didn't win enough, faced the toughest schedule in the country, didn't win enough. And not only did they not win, they got blown out against Miami. They got blown out against A&M, both games at home. The program looked dead in the water. And all you can do is keep chopping. All the very, very old cliches are actually old because they work. And Napier it knows no other way. And now you're in a situation where a lot of people close to the Florida program who once left him for dead, now you got to make a decision, and you better fully buy in because that is your guy. Like, Napier is still your guy. And the locker room is telling you that. The performance of that team is telling you that. That quarterback, you want to see how important a position is as to the future of a program. Look elsewhere. Look around the country. And then know you've got one. You've got one other folks would envy. And he's tied to that head coach. You save buyout money, Yeah, redirect it over to NIL. Just I personally have got to remind myself constantly. You got to wait until the end of the season to judge these guys, because if you and I talked in July, you would have said, and I would have agreed with you, if Florida wins 7 games this year, that's a very successful season. They're probably going to win 7 games. And yet the guy was fired 5 times at various points this year. Crazy how this game works. It is that emotion, that week-to-week swing. Once you get into the fog of the season, I don't think Sun Tzu ever called it that, but I do. The fog of the season. It's tough. It's tough. Opinions go all over the place.